Due to some other commitments, I was thinking that I wouldn't be able to make it on the time slot allowed, but I managed to rearrange, so I would deliver my speech in person here. So, and especially there where you had some issues in the recording. So let me first welcome to all the well-respected audience here. And my name is Alexey Savin. I'm a consulting principal of IQVIA. I'm responsible for East Europe. And today I wanted to cover an overview of pharmaceutical Russia markets of CIS region, including Russia, Ukraine, and other CIS countries. And before going into that, some of you might know about IQVIA, some of you might not, but just IQVIA, the company I'm representing, is a global provider and powerhouse focused on supporting life science companies, manufacturing companies with unparalleled data assets, clinical trials capabilities, consultant expertise, technology, and clinical solutions across the world. It's a New York publicly traded company, and in the Russian CIS region, we basically do cover all the countries in the region, including sales, promotion, physician universe, prescriptions in some of the countries. And we do have teams sitting in the countries and teams of consultants as well who help me to prepare this presentation. Team of consultants sitting in Moscow, Kiev, and Almaty. And in this presentation, I basically use the data and the expertise of our team, just for you to know. And I would like to start with a macroeconomic perspective of Russia and CIS. It's combined, it's almost 300 million population region with more than $6 trillion GDP. And here is the snapshot of the major countries of the region and some benchmarks of Central East Europe and Turkey here. And the region is basically driven by exploration of natural resources. So world commodity prices and demand impact heavily economies and local currencies. And from the healthcare perspective, the region is undertaking a transformation of its healthcare systems from ex-Soviet Semashko system to different basically directions. Some countries do decentralize healthcare systems to run them completely in a private manner, such as Georgia. Some keep it centralized, as in Belarus or Kazakhstan. But overall, there is a constant change here. If we look at the pharma markets, the region represents approximately 2% of the global pharma market. And of course, it's not a big share if you compare it with North America or West Europe. But in the meantime, if you look at the left-hand side, right-hand side graph, we see that Russia and CIS has a high growth potential, even comparing with other global regions. This is a IQVIA forecast presented for more than 50 countries. And these are the forecast which has been updated in the COVID period, like in May, June of 2020. So you see that the region has quite a potential here, which can be explored. Here is a snapshot of the key markets, and on the left-hand side, there is a scale for all markets except for Russia, and on the right-hand side, there's a scale for Russia because they have a different magnitude of impact. But overall, we see that all the markets are developing quite nicely. Over the last 3 years, the markets were having, in the region, were having approximately high single-digit or even double-digit growth. And we've also included numbers for 8 months of 2020 to reflect COVID dynamics. And you see there's a lot of volatility here, especially on some of the markets. Ukraine, for example, has jumped down to 5%. Kazakhstan, it's the other way around, jumped up to 28%. And The countries which jumped up, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Georgia, it's driven mainly with state procurements. And here is basically the potential, how we envision the potential of those markets in the future. We see that the region still represents high growth potential if you compare with many other regions. And by 2024, it should grow by 1.5, by a factor of 1.5 from now. With the biggest chunk of it is Russia, of course, 70%, but followed with Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan as major markets here, and Azerbaijan, major markets here. I wanted, it's a very short presentation at this conference, but I wanted to highlight key distinctive features of this region that you as manufacturers need to be aware of. And one is the region is quite diverse from different standpoints, like regulatory, incomes level, etc., etc. So even though from the external perspective, it might look more homogeneous as a kind of parts of one country at some point of time. Second, there is an increasing pressure on the budgets, on the prices. So, and this leads to a higher competition for both generics and international innovative manufacturers. Third, there's more and more trend towards introducing protectionism measures and provide some local preferences for locally manufactured products. And for you as international manufacturers, that's a big factor to take into account if you consider those markets to enter. And fourth, those markets are quite strong, have quite strong retail out-of-pocket segment. And let me give you a little bit of the details on those key trends. First, region is quite diverse, and it starts from the diversity coming from the regulatory system. There are different practices regulators undertake to shape pharma markets with different degree of transparency, competition, control of the pricing and margins. For example, Ukraine, if you take Ukraine, it's kind of a more, behaves more like a liberal free market without price margin controls, with small share of state purchasing. It's a question whether it's good or not for patients, but it's basically it's like a free competition market here. While in Kazakhstan, for example, the government introduces more and more measures to control margins. Basically, a couple of years ago, Kazakhstan has introduced price controls even for retail segments of the market. And Kazakhstan has limited detailing to physicians as well, and some other countries somewhere in between, Russia, for example. So this is a diverse system. Second, state plays different role in financing market consumptions. And here you see the snapshot of the region, and it goes from Russia and Kazakhstan. From one hand, where state funds approximately 40% of the market, pharmaceutical market purchases, down to 9, 11, 12% in Moldova, Ukraine, Armenia. And but overall, in CIS region, this is still way below European levels. And here are the benchmarks of East Europe, where state funds approximately 70% in the form of reimbursement or some kind of co-payment, and West Europe it's 85%. But overall, governments gradually increase the spending, and you see there are multiple reforms and initiatives are going on in the countries here. So there is an increase in government programs for Russia, for example, focusing on oncology, cardiology, rare diseases. There is an introduction of compulsory medical insurance in Kazakhstan, and there are plans to do that in Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan. So there's a lot going on here. There's also a difference and diversity coming from therapy consumption. Richer countries of the region spend more on more expensive therapies, such as oncology, specialty, rare diseases. Lower income countries spend more on the basic old products, such as anti-infectives, cardiovascular system. But overall, if you compare that with Europe, for example, you see that innovative and high-cost treatments are underrepresented in the region, and generics and OTC consumer health are relatively more presented in the region. Basically, this diversity impacts the way companies choose their portfolio and their go-to-market strategy entering the business. And here is just one of the case examples of one of the manufacturers that basically rolls out its business in CIS countries. And with our discussions, the company decided to set up a mixed structure with a focus on some products such as like oncology, high specialty in some markets, for example, such as Russia, Kazakhstan, while there was no potential in some other markets, and vice versa. On the other hand, old type molecules portfolio in basic primary care markets were a primary focus for some other countries, such as Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. So as a result, company ended up with a completely different and mixed structure, fully exploring regional potential here. Second trend is budget pressure. So you see, if you compare CIS region with Central East Europe, you see that CIS spends a way lower share of GDP on healthcare overall. So, pharma markets as a result, on the right-hand side picture, pharma markets are lagging behind on both pricing and volume here. So governments have a pressure to increase coverage of population and bring more innovative and to be honest, costly treatments to the markets. And both measures means that higher spending, and basically governments are looking for the ways to limit them, especially in the COVID times. And here is the snapshot and just a 5-year dynamics to see how the situation has been developing. And we see that for the last 5 years, we observed quite a significant price growth across the region. And there is also was still potential for volume growth in some countries. For example, have a look at Uzbekistan here. So huge growth potential from the volume perspective. But overall, yeah, we see that with the COVID-related challenges and economic decline coming after that for 2021 would be quite a harsh one. We could expect budget tightening across CIS region, and you need to be take aware to keep that in mind. And here is an example of another kind of case example to see how it impacts manufacturers. One of our clients faced such a push from the Russian tendering market. And the company had a great portfolio, but didn't succeed on the market and wanted to understand why and how to fix it. And during this project, we investigated key budget priorities, regional differences, because out of 85 regions of Russia, they have different priorities on the therapy level. And spot success factors for different regions, such as ability to get into offset contracts with some richer regions with the longer-term commitments, changing partnering strategy, adjusting tendering phases, and some focus on some of the therapies for different regions. Thirdly, CIS countries introduce more and more protectionism measures, which basically benefit local manufacturers and international manufacturers who are introducing local manufacturing facilities. There might be some different forms of local preferences, such as some procurement rules giving preferences for locally manufactured products, such as they exist in Russia, for example, and other Eurasian Economic Union countries. Just to give you an example, if there are two manufacturers who have locally manufactured products participating in the tenders, then third and anyone else, international manufacturers would be kicked out of the tender no matter the price. So these kind of preferences. Direct discounts on the price in tenders for locally manufactured products. Some offset contracts, such as in Kazakhstan or some regions in Russia. Some direct contracts such as Uzbekistan. And that basically leads to different level of locally manufactured companies. Here is a snapshot of the share of locally manufactured, manufactured only by local companies. We haven't included here internationals who have local manufacturers in those countries, but still we see that Russia has increased quite significantly, 30%, Ukraine 45% with like former Soviet plants located there, Belarus 30–40%, other countries not so much, but many are trying to bring international pharmaceutical manufacturers such as Uzbekistan for now, for example, Kazakhstan, and they are willing to provide some preferences for internationals who would be coming into those countries. And here is an example, again, that local preferences, they might represent challenges, but they also might represent some interesting opportunities here. For example, Russian government have introduced a set of preferences for locally manufactured products, and one of them was 25% price difference for on tenders for products which are using locally manufactured APIs, substances basically. And one of our clients has decided to run a feasibility study of investing into these API manufacturing facilities, leveraging the preferences introduced by the Russian government. And many of you know that API substances is a kind of economy of scale business, and like 70% of the world's manufacturers, APIs manufacturers, are located in China, India. Quite a significant share because of the economies of scale. But price difference on the final tender price might be a big incentive, making even more costly APIs more attractive. And with here, for example, we investigated that it might be effective for a list of specific products, and for some specific clients, potential clients as kind of manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers. But for some of them, it still doesn't make sense. So it should be, you should take into account those kind of rules and those specifics of those countries. Fourth distinctive feature of the region is a big role of out-of-pocket and retail segment. And it's really high. Russia, Ukraine, CIS countries are leading world's consumption in many OTC and consumer health categories. And here you see like 47% of the market is non-prescription OTC, some cases 30%. So it's quite a significant share. If you take, for example, Western Europe, it's like 5–6% on average. It's a way lower number there. So for OTC consumer health, it's an interesting market here, and brands play a significant role here. But on top of that, as a result of these specifics, CIS markets are quite heavily dominated with pharmacies and chains who are holding power over manufacturers with pharmacy switches. Here is the situation of the Russian market, but it's very similar to in Ukraine, in Kazakhstan, and it's coming in many other CIS markets as well. Basically, as prescription generated at the physician office could be changed at pharmacy to other product in the same INN or even different INNs in non-prescription segment or in consumer health segment. It's a challenge for some of the manufacturers, but at the same time, it can be considered as an opportunity to build commercial pro models for some of the market entrants without even visiting physicians, so having kind of huge cost synergies and cost savings. And here is an example here. So Russia, with this pharmacy strong role of pharmacies and pharmacy chains, Russia here moves, and many Ukraine as well, and many other CIS markets are moving more towards the US model, when cracking the supply chain becomes critical for getting the market access on the retail segment. So it becomes way more crucial than even having the lowest priced products here. Here is an example of the client who was reviewing its commercial approach in order to take growing chains share and other supply chains. And they revisited the approach to chains, and they understood in which categories, product categories, such as, I don't know, cough and cold, like allergy and some others, they need to adjust their strategy with the chains and their margins allocated to chains, and in which categories they're leaving money on the table and they need just to squeeze down. So it's like very much fine tuning and making and cracking these channels and making good propositions to these important stakeholder to those important stakeholders on the pharmaceutical markets. Basically, that's it from my side. So, and I just wanted to. In a conclusion, I just wanted to give you some kind of an overview, and I would say that those CIS region is an attractive one. It's one of the leading from the world's perspective, from the growth perspective, but at the same time, it has some distinctive features on different layers, which you need to take into account. And and we saw many cases of new entrants which were extremely successful on those markets. But in the meantime, we saw many cases when companies were entering and failing. So knowing local specifics is a key to be successful in this region. Thank you, everyone. Here are my details, contact details if needed. So, and have a nice day. Thanks, colleagues. Yes, if you have any questions, in the meantime, if you have any questions, you may spot them and I'll try to take a couple of them. Please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Savin. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, thank you so much for your speech. And we've got one question for you from the audience. And could you tell us about your expectations of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to the CIS market in the next 2 years? So I'm wondering if you still have the time to answer this question on live.
Yeah, sure. So COVID-19 will have a serious impact across those markets, basically, as many other markets aside this region. But we should expect really the impact would be coming from the first, the impact will be on the growth rates and on the structure of those markets. So we'll see a way higher share of some of the treatments. We saw already that some countries, Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, are making stockpiling. So the governments are purchasing some of the drugs there. So that's for some categories, it's an extreme growth, like 2 times, 3 times we saw. But for the majority of the markets, it will be a slowdown. Then second, there will be a huge impact on the commercial models. So we already saw that for many countries of this region, as well as many other regions, medical representatives as a major driving force was sitting at home for a few months, and they will get back for sure, but in the meantime it will never be the same at the same level as it used to be. And so it will be a big fundamental shift towards digital channels, digital remote channels. And you as clients, as manufacturers, need to have your key stakeholders, physicians, pharmacists, contacts right. Like, and digital presence becomes a critical one in a post-COVID time. And manufacturers who would crack these digital segmentation, digital detailing models would be on top of the markets here. So I would building digital infrastructure, building agile structures, and cracking these on those markets would become critical in the next couple of years.